Um, I was just telling Michi, sorry, Russell, I'll just tell Michi too. My name is Josh, and I'm a qualified teacher from Australia with over 10 years experience teaching in classrooms and online. And I've written all of the PTE lesson material or the lesson plans for our course. And so I'm just here today to show you about what sets us apart and what e-English is all about, okay? Michi, could I just ask you, I'm speaking to you because I've already been speaking to Russell. Have you done a PTE exam before? And what sort of English level would you say you're at now? So that I assume that means you have not done a PTE exam. And what would you say your current? Okay, you're beginner. That's great. That's fine. That's what. Okay, that's good. That's what Russell has said he is too. So that's good. We'll take it nice and slow. All right. So I was just explaining. I'm not sure how familiar you are with PTE, Michi, but it's an AI scored exam that has 4 parts: speaking, writing, reading, and listening. And so we really need to become proficient. We need to become fluent in each of those areas as much as possible, okay? So let's talk about what makes e-English different, okay? First of all, with e-English, you choose your own lessons based on your level and your goals, okay? So we actually have 3 streams, 3 courses: an introductory course, the A2 level, which I'll talk about a little bit later, B1, which is intermediate, and then a B2, which is more advanced, okay? I think very importantly in e-English, because the classes are with real teachers, you're not just doing practice material. This is what's really different. You're actually getting classes with a real person. You get live feedback throughout every lesson and at the end of every lesson, which I think is the most valuable thing when you're learning. It's very hard to know what you're doing right or wrong without feedback. And that's a really, really powerful difference that you get when you have classes with a real person. You can choose to focus on one skill or all 4, because the way that our course works for PTE is the lessons are based on each element of the exam, okay? So there are actually 20 elements, and you can choose to work on whichever elements you want to work on. You can study at any time and anywhere, and it all connects to a personalized learning plan. So far, is everything making sense? Are there any questions?
I think you should continue. I have no question.
I continue? Okay. So I talked just before about, okay, thank you for saying that, Michi. Thank you. Let's continue then. So we have also a stream, a level called A2, which is an introductory level. And that is, it's ideal for building grammar, vocabulary, and comprehension skills, okay, while preparing for academic tasks. So it's for people who are not quite ready to do PTE exam questions. If you feel like you're not quite ready to really go straight into doing preparation and practice exam questions all the time, then we actually have a stream where you're going over the basics of English and getting you prepared so that you can do that. So I'm not sure when you say you're beginner, if you feel like you're at that level, like you're not ready to do the PTE exam, but it's there if you feel that you need to, get stronger in the basics. But at the same time, in that course, in every lesson, you're always practicing those 4 skills that you need for PTE. speaking, writing, reading, and listening, just at a lower level, okay, until you're ready to move into the B1 or B2 courses, okay, where you're getting into really focusing on PTE. So Russell, I think you said you wanted your target score is a 58, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I try to
Okay.
speed rate.
Great. So for you, you want to be doing. I'm not sure if you think you need to do the A2. My guess is you could start at you would do the B1 course, because the target score for the B1 course, once you finish B1, you should be able to get a 58. Okay. If
Okay.
you're aiming to do higher than that, to get a higher target score, then you'd want to go to the B2. But for 58, B1 is good. Okay.
Okay.
Mitchie, do you know what your target score is?
I think she's typing now.
Yeah. Okay. Good question. All right. So you need to, I think maybe you're a little bit less familiar with PTE. Okay. So basically all different exams have different ways of giving you grades. So when I say your target score, what I mean by that is the score that you want to get from the PTE exam. So if you're wanting to do the PTE exam because, for example, you want to study in Australia or in Canada or something like that, and you have a particular course that you want to do, it might say in that course you need to get this level in order to study at our university, at our college, or whatever it might be. So you might not know your target score, and Mitchie, that's absolutely fine. It's not a problem at all, okay? Some people know their target score. That's why I was asking. But you need to, it depends on what your goal is. If you want to migrate, if you just want to study, you're going to have a different target score, okay? All right. So before we get into the actual lesson material, I might actually just show you guys quickly what the app looks like and how you can get yourself a subscription, and how you can book in for a lesson, okay? All right, so I'll just quickly sign in first.
There is another one.
Can you see my screen? Can you see the e-English app? Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes, I
Yep.
can see.
Okay. Great. Okay, so let's say you signed in, you've made an account. First thing you need to do is get a subscription, okay? So you can choose, we have one-on-one lessons and we have group sessions, okay? So first you need to choose whether you want to get one-on-one lessons or group sessions. Let's say you want one-on-one. So you stay on one-on-one. Workplace, that's a whole nother stream, okay? You would be choosing for PTE between the A2, which was the introductory level, the B1 and the B2. So for example, for Russell, I probably recommend you would go with the B1, okay? So you would click purchase. Going a bit slowly. Okay, and you'd put in your details, etc. Okay. Okay, so let's say you then you've got your subscription, then you want to make a booking and you have the different teachers that are available. So let's just take me because I've opened up some slots, okay? And you can see when I'm available, and you click book, you pick PTE, you pick, let's say, A2 and your lesson topic, okay? And then you can write notes about what you might want to work on, anything you want the teacher to know, all right? So, and that's how you do it. And then you just click confirm and you've booked in for a lesson, okay?
Okay.
So that's just a little bit about how, and then in your dashboard, go back to your dashboard, it will tell you your upcoming lessons, okay? So if this were you would have, it would say when your lesson is. All right. So that's just so you get a bit of a feel for what the website, what the app looks like. Are there any questions at this stage? No? Okay. Okay, thank you, Michi. Russell, I assume you're all good then. Guys, if you have any questions at any stage, anytime, please ask me, especially because it's only the two of you. You don't have to worry about talking over each other. Also, Michi, I said to Russell earlier, this is meant to be a class. So I'm not just presenting. So please, I'd love you to actually try and answer questions as much as you're comfortable with and as much as you can. It just makes everything more engaging and most importantly, more useful for you, okay? All right, enough about all that stuff. Let's now have a look at some actual, some of our lesson material, okay? So I'm going to show you. There we go. Sorry, just a sec. Just have to share my screen with you. Where's it? Here we go. All right. So this is describe image. Now, maybe Russell, if you've been practicing PTE a little bit, you'll be familiar with this element. It's an element that many students have some difficulty with. Okay. Yeah. So that's why I want to show you today. And we're going to go through a graph together and just see how we might answer that in a structured and thought through way. So this is also what a lesson plan looks like. Okay. We have an exam tip in every lesson plan. Okay. So for example, this exam tip is, remember, you have 25 seconds to study the image. And that's really, really important. You can't waste any time that you have, okay? So you need to use those 25 seconds to identify and focus on the main details of the image, what the key features are, what changes or trends stand out, and then start to think about how you will structure your description logically. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at how we can structure our response for a describe image task. Okay. Now, every lesson also includes really useful vocabulary that is specific for that area, for that element, sorry. Okay. And so on and so forth. So every lesson has multiple practice questions, but most importantly, and this is another thing that really makes English different, is we teach you strategies that you can use to answer the questions. It's not just practice material. You can get lots of practice material online. We teach you strategies you can use to do the best you can in each question. All right? Any questions so far?
I think you make a practical practice to show us.
Sorry?
I think you should a practice session to show us how the elements are working.
A practice session. Yeah, we're going to do some practice now. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I'm just saying exactly this.
Okay. All right. So let's have a look. This is a graph. What do you notice about this graph? So remember, let's say we're looking at this and we have our 25 seconds, okay, that we have to prepare. What are the main things that we see straight away in this graph? Could you tell me?
It's the monthly sale data for 2023.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what the graph is showing us for sure. What about this line? What's the line telling us?
It's a sales unit. It's going up and down.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, absolutely. That's very important. Obviously, we need to explain. We need to describe what what the graph is showing us, for sure. But also we need to, and this is what's really important, is we need to identify the main data points of the graph. So usually that will be where it starts, okay, where it peaks, the top, okay, where it drops to, and where it finishes, okay? Does that make sense, guys? Does that make sense?
Yes, it means, but
Okay.
here is similar is October. In October, it's some growing and then continue down.
That's right. So very good, Russell. So we would say something, okay, in this graph, all right, so let's have a look. The graph depicts monthly sales data for an electronics company in 2023. Good. And this is exactly what you said, Russell. The x-axis represents the months. The y-axis represents sales in thousands of units. Okay, that's how we might start it. But what we need to do is identify these points, and we need to talk about how we explain that. And so what we have as well is we also have a template, okay, which helps students, where especially if you're not feeling so confident yet, because obviously you can't take your template in for your exam, okay, but when you're practicing, this is very, very useful, okay? So if we have a look at this, this is our template, and we have different templates that you can use for different types of graphs, okay? We have some different examples, bar charts, etc. But we're doing a line graph, so we're going to use our line graph template. The chart shows the monthly sales data from January till December in, when was it? It was in 2023, okay? For example, in January 2023, the initial figure was 20,000 units, okay? So we can use this template and put our values that we find in the graph. Remember, we talked about the lowest point and the peak. And then, like you said, Russell, it rose up and then it fell. It fell and then it fluctuated, right? So you don't have to use those words exactly, but when we're starting out, this is a really good structure that we can follow. You can see that we have an introduction, then we talk about the main ideas, the main parts of the graph, and then we do a little conclusion at the end, okay? So let's have a look at how this actually works. Let me just go back to our lesson plan. Okay, so here we have our key details. So we had our introduction, which you did really well, Russell. And perhaps this is where we need to work on a bit more, our body, our key details. It's a little bit like if you've ever written an essay, it's something similar to that. Not quite as long, but it's a very similar way we need to think about it. We need to introduce what our image is about. Then we need to put in the most important information. And imagine that the person who you're writing this for can't see the graph. That's a good way to think about it. Explain this graph for someone who can't see it, okay? So the graph shows the sales started at 20,000 units, okay, in January, and increased, this is some useful vocabulary, increased steadily to a peak. A peak means the top.
Yeah.
Okay, if you know that word, it means the top. It steadily to a peak of 60,000 units up here in July, June and July, okay? So those are some very, if you wanted to explain this graph to someone, that's where you would say, start. It started 20,000 and for the first half of the year or the first 6 months, however you want to say it, it rose, it increased steadily until it got to about 60,000 units and then what happened in July? What happened in July?
July to August is down. Totally down.
And did it go down slowly or did it go down very quickly?
It's rapidly 60 to 30.
Yeah, it rapidly. And so you're right, it went down quickly. So another way to get higher scores is we need to know some good vocabulary. So we can say it fell rapidly, it decreased quickly, it fell dramatically. Okay, these are all different words we can use to say the same thing. Okay, so the sale started at 20,000 units in January and increased steadily to a peak of 60,000 units in July. However, sales declined sharply. Again, another way to say it. In August, dropping down to 30,000 units. So it dropped by half, and then it fluctuated. Do you guys know what the word fluctuated means?
Yeah, I know. It's down and up and down.
That's right. That's good, Russell. I don't think you're beginner, Russell. I'd say you're intermediate, just so you know. But good. So it fluctuated. It went up and then it went back down. And then, very importantly, you finish at where the last important detail that you must include is where the graph ends. And that is about, what's that? Probably about 37,000 units in December. Okay. So then we do a little conclusion where what do you not put in a conclusion, guys? In whether it's this or an essay, what do you never put in a conclusion? Any ideas?
I think.
Okay.
I think in January it's going up 30,000. 20,000 to 60,000. It's rapidly, and after that, July and August it's down rapidly, and then August to December it's fluctuated.
Yes, absolutely. You've done a really good job. That's explaining it very well. But what I wanted to say was, with the conclusion, you never put in new information. We just go over everything we've already talked about. Okay. Hi, Jyoti, is it?
I think here is new.
Sorry. Can you hear me, Jyoti?
I think it's Jyoti Mandal.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Jyoti? Could you either say something or write in the chat just to so I know that you can hear me? Yes, Russell?
No, I have no.
Sorry?
Nothing.
Okay. Jyoti, can you... okay, great. Well, welcome, Jyoti. Well, look, we're already about halfway through, so I'm not going to go back through everything, but just very quickly, I'll just explain to you that I'm showing an example lesson from our website. This is for Describe Image, okay? And this is from our B1 course, okay? So we've just been talking about and looking at this graph and how we would go about answering the question of describing this image, this graph, okay? And we're just talking about how it's really important to have a good structure. So we have an introduction, what the image is about. Okay, so the image in our introduction, we would include what the graph is. So it's monthly sales data for the year 2023 and includes the number of sales, okay? And then this is what's really important. We have our body, which is our key details, our numbers and trends, okay? So we have to identify our starting point, our peak, our lowest point where it drops to, or any sort of standout part of the graph, and where it ends, okay? So that might look something like this. The graph shows that sales started at 20,000 units in January and increased steadily to a peak of 60,000 units in July. However, sales declined sharply in August, reaching 30,000 units, and then fluctuated between 30 and 40,000 units for the rest of the year. Okay, that is just an example of how we might look at one graph. And we can use, and I'll just show you again. Remember, when we're practicing, we can use our template. Again, we don't recommend that you memorize the templates, because when you come to the exam, you can't use your template, but it is very useful at the beginning. Okay, and in this template, it also gives us useful vocabulary that we can use for our different graphs. So increase, rise, remain stable, etc. Okay. All right. Do we have any questions? Let's just go back. Do we have any questions about describe image, about the lesson plan that we've just been going through? Any questions about this one? No?
I think
You're all good? Shall we move on to another lesson plan? Okay, thanks, Jyoti, for letting me know. Okay, so that was just one, just quickly before we move on, I just want to explain to you that that was one strategy, okay? Using the 25 seconds to focus on the main ideas and key features. But every lesson includes multiple strategies, usually 3 different strategies, okay? So for example, and we don't have time to go through this strategy again, but the second strategy in this lesson plan is learning all about using the accurate vocabulary for graphs and pictures, okay? So for example, we talk and learn about words we can use for when graphs move, okay? So this won't apply for every graph. If we have, for example, a pie chart, we don't get rise and fall, okay? But for a line graph, which we just did, we do need to know these sorts of vocabulary, okay? So I'm just showing you this would be a second strategy that we would learn. So you can see that and then you have obviously lots of different types of graphs to practice with, all the time receiving feedback from your teacher, okay? Any questions, or shall I move on to the next lesson that I want to show you? All right, let's move on. So the next lesson is another element that some students have difficulty with, okay? And that is retail lecture. Has anybody here done any retail lecture practice yet?
I haven't.
You haven't. Okay. What about you, Jyoti? You have. Okay. And how do you find it? Would you say that it's easy or difficult? I encourage people. Okay, good. I encourage people to speak. Like if you're shy and you don't want to talk, that's understandable. But if you're happy to speak, that would be great, because I'd love this to be more interactive, but you don't have to. Okay, so Jyoti has done retail lecture and you found it quite easy. All right, good. So would you say then that maybe your strengths are listening? Okay. Yeah, I can't hear you. So yeah, fair enough. Thank you for letting me know, Jyoti. I appreciate that. So it sounds like probably your listening and your speaking is quite good. Is there a particular skill that you think you need to work more on?
I think my fluency is not enough.
Sorry, Russell?
I think my fluency level is not enough.
Right. Okay. All right, guys, let's move on to retail lecture so I can show you another lesson plan. Okay, so we can see here that again, we have our exam tip, okay? So for example, in this one, when listening to the lecture, focus on capturing key content words like nouns, verbs, and numbers. This is very important. Don't try to write everything down. You're not going to be able to do it. You're going to get lost, and it's a recipe for disaster. In other words, it's not possible. You need to learn to focus on the most important parts that you listen to, okay? you need to pay attention to what we call signposting words. That means when a speaker says things like firstly or in conclusion, usually that the things that will come after that are very important bits of information, okay? And also they help to structure your response. So that's our exam tip. And then obviously being a lesson, we have an objective. So this particular lesson, we focus on practicing summarizing a spoken lecture in a structured and clear manner. Okay, so just like describe image, also retail lecture needs to be done in a structured way. Okay, we need to improve listening comprehension, note-taking skills, and oral fluency. Okay, so we of course we also have our vocabulary list of very useful words for this element, but let's get into it. So again, like in every lesson, there are multiple strategies. We don't have time to go through all of them. We're just going to go through one today, okay? The first strategy, which is all about just trying to identify as much as we can the main points. Now, I just want to show you that if we had more time in this lesson plan, the second strategy is learning about using abbreviations. Okay, does everybody know what an abbreviation is? So an abbreviation is when we write something really short to refer or to mean something a lot longer, because when you're listening to a relatively long piece of a lecture, as I said, you can't write everything down. So knowing some useful abbreviations can be really, really important. But again, we don't have time for that now. But that would be, for example, another strategy that you would learn with your teacher in this lesson. But for now, all I want to do with you today is we're going to listen to a recording. And I just want you guys to do the best you can to listen actively, which means to really focus and just write down either on a piece of paper or in a Word document or in the chat, just the main points that you can identify from the recording. Okay, and then we'll talk about it after. Are you guys all okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to play the recording. And like I said, I just want you to do your best to write down a few main points, and then we'll talk about it after. Okay. Here we go.
George, have you opened the audio? We cannot hear the audio.
Oh, really?
Yes.
No,
That's
I
strange.
can't hear.
You could or you couldn't hear?
No, I can't.
Can't. Okay. What's happened there? Why did that happen? Okay, let me try something different. Sorry, guys. Normally I would in the app it's the actual app, it's a bit different. Let's see if this works. Tell me if you can hear now, okay?
Today, we will discuss the...
Can you hear that?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
good.
audible.
Yes.
All right, good. So let's try that again. So yeah, just try to take your write down just the main points. Don't write everything down, just the words that you think are most important. Okay, here we go.
Today, we will discuss the impact of urbanization on wildlife. Urbanization refers to the process where natural habitats are replaced by cities, towns, and infrastructure. This has significant consequences for biodiversity. For example, the construction of roads and buildings fragments ecosystems, making it difficult for animals to move freely and find food. Furthermore, pollution from human activities can contaminate water sources, affecting both plants and animals.
Okay, we won't go through all of it today because we don't have a lot of time, but I think that's enough for you to maybe taken down a few words. How did you go? Did anyone write anything down?
Yes, sir. Impact of urbanization, cities, towns, infrastructure, ecosystem move freely and contaminate water sources.
Fantastic. That's great. That's really good. Thank you. And
Thank you,
also,
sir.
I saw, Russell, you wrote some good things too. Russell, wildlife, biodiversity, pollution, human activity. Good. And Michi, significant. All right, good. That's a really, really good start. Okay. So you can see by writing down those keywords, those are really, really good keywords. Like, let's take Russell's, for example, wildlife, biodiversity, pollution, human activity. These are words that you can then put into a structure, but you've got those keywords from the recording, right? So we can insert it into a really good structure that we can learn. So just like how we had our template for describe image, we also have one for retail lecture. Now, again, we don't recommend you to just use this and memorize it, but it's great when you're starting out and practicing. The lecture was about, what do you think, if you had to use one word or a few words to name the lecture, what would you say was the main topic, guys?
Impact of urbanization.
Perfect. Excellent. So the lecture was about the impact of urbanization. The speaker began by explaining how, what urbanization is, right? And then they introduced, etc. Okay. So let's have a look again. So for example, again, Russell, so we talked about, so the first point was the lecturer began by explaining urbanization is the movement of people from the rural areas to towns and cities, and then what did he introduce after that?
Ecosystem, maybe.
Yeah, the impact on the ecosystem, on biodiversity, etc. Okay, so obviously this is a longer task that you need to take more notes, but that's a really good start. And you can see we got, just like in the describe image, we've also got a bit of a structure here. The lecture started, the lecture was about, so that's our introduction. And then this is sort of our body, okay? And then we have our conclusion at the end. So it's in many ways, it's a very similar structure. And in the same way that in the describe image, we have to identify the main points, but we're looking at the graph. In this case, we're also identifying the main points, but we're doing it from listening. So it's a different skill, but our output, what we're creating, is somewhat similar, okay? So when you think of it like that, what you need to do is identify the main ideas, the main points, and then put it into a nice structured response and try to put in some appropriate and academic vocabulary. Does that make sense, guys?
Yes, sir.
Good. Any questions?
No, sir.
Okay. So we could, if we had more time, I would happily do that for longer, and we'd listen to the whole lecture and we'd create our response. But obviously these elements take some time, but you can see how having a whole lesson with a teacher, providing feedback, coming up with a really good, solid response can be really, really valuable. And then learning things like note-taking, etc. And I actually just wanted to show you, because in this lesson plan, we also have, for example, and this is a very high level response, okay? A very high level. So I'm not saying there's no expectation that anyone would be at this level straight away, but this is what perhaps a summary of the lecture might look like when you get to a very high level, okay? The lecture discussed the impact of urbanization on wildlife, and that's where we started. That's exactly where we were. It explained that urbanization involves replacing natural habitats with cities and infrastructure. Jyoti, you picked up that word, good, which often fragments ecosystems and limits animal movement. Okay, so I think you can see, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if we continue that process of taking down those notes and then putting it into our framework, into our structure, we can eventually get to something like this. Can we see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Any questions, any comments, anything you want to talk about with regards to retail lecture?
So is it okay to like note down few of the phrases with combination of single words, or we need to pick only those phrases, like only in the phrases? We cannot pick single word, or how is it like?
Oh, no, good question. Thank you. No, absolutely. You could. It doesn't have to be phrases. It can 100% be single words. It just needs to be words that are important for the actual content. What I mean by that is, if we have a look at this summary, a word like additionally is not a word that is from the lecture, right? That's a word that we put in to fill in or to make sense in the sentence. Words that you should be identifying from the lecture are like urbanization, wildlife, okay, habitats, right? They don't have to be full sentences, one word, but you can then put that into a sentence and it makes sense, right? Does that answer your question, Jyoti?
Yes, sir. Also, one more question:
Yes,
do we need to be worried about the grammar for this section or not?
Okay. Yes, we grammar is always important, but I think that if you learn how to structure your sentences, then the focus should be on identifying the main ideas and then putting that into your summary. Of course, it's important to get correct grammar, but what I suggest is that if you think grammar is something you need to work on, we also have grammar lessons you can work on, but I think that you should do the grammar. First of all, I should go back a second. First of all, your teacher that in your class will help you with your grammar. Okay, if you have any issues with your grammar, that's what the teacher's for. But also, you can do it alongside, and I also the fact that we have our template, okay, and also example answers will also help you with your grammar. But I think that when it comes to doing something like this, it's more important to focus on learning the strategies that I'm talking about, like identifying the main ideas and being able to take effective notes in an abbreviated way, like I showed you. That will help you a lot more. And the grammar kind of that comes with getting better with practice. I definitely think it's a good idea to work on any grammar that you don't feel that you could still work on 100%. But my answer is, the most important thing is learning the strategies and learning how and practicing implementing or using those strategies in practice questions. That's how you're going to get your best results.
Thank you, sir.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. Any other questions from this one? No. Okay. So the last, because I can't go through all the lessons today. There is 20 different types of lessons. There's actually many more lessons, but there's the 20 elements. We can't go through all of them today. There's one more I'd like to go through with you, and that is read aloud, okay? Which in many ways is a much more straightforward element, okay? It's not about, you don't have to summarize, you don't have to have comprehension, nothing like that. It's just about reading and pronouncing. But I want to do this because I want to show you how having a teacher, a real person teaching you, can be very helpful, okay? Can everybody see my screen? Yes. So this is going to be super interactive, and I just want to get volunteers to have a go at reading, and I'm just going to provide any feedback that I think is useful for you in terms of reading and pronunciation, and any strategies that you might be able to use if you have any problems, okay? So who would like to go first?
Sir, I don't mind.
Okay, thank you, Jyoti. Okay, so why don't you just start with number one then?
Sure. Technological advancement have transformed the landscape of modern communication, revolutionizing how individuals interact with one another across the globe.
Okay, very, very, very good. One thing I noticed is when you read advancements, you actually dropped the S on the end. I don't know if you're aware. So you just need to be careful when you're reading to pronounce every syllable in the word. So technological advancements have
Mhm.
transformed the landscape of modern communication. All right, so have one more go at that, please.
So should I?
Yeah, yes, please. Yeah.
Environmental sustainability is a pressing global issue. Governments and organizations worldwide are developing strategies to mitigate the impact of climate change, promote renewable energy, and reduce pollution.
Okay, also very, very good. You didn't miss any syllables then. The only thing I would probably encourage you to work on a little bit is, and it's not wrong, but you put the
Mhm.
emphasis of
Yes,
developing, put it very heavily on the first syllable, which is not something that
yes,
we always do in English. So developing. So if
developing.
you, yeah. Now, of course, there are different accents in English. Not everyone has to pronounce it the same. I'm not saying
Right,
that. But yeah, but try that again. Developing.
developing.
Good. Okay, so maybe could you just read number 2 again for me?
Sure, sir. Environmental sustainability is a pressing global issue. Governments and organizations worldwide are developing strategies to mitigate the impact of climate change, promote renewable energy, and reduce pollution.
Excellent. Really, really good.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, would anybody else like to have a go? Russell, are you happy to have a go?
Yeah, may I
Okay.
start?
Yeah, why don't you have a go at number 1?
Technological advancement have transformed the landscape of modern communication, revolutionizing how individuals interact with one another across the globe.
Okay, Russell, not bad. What you need to work on is a bit of your fluency, so your flow, and also making sure that you enunciate. In other words, pronounce every part of a word. So actually you read it quite well. I can see that you know how to read it, but when you're some of the longer words, when you say it out loud, you kind of it doesn't come out so fluently. You're like technological when it should be technological. You should really pronounce each part. So one of the strategies that you can use, especially for these longer words, is to break the words down into syllables. Okay. So for example, technological. Could you say that?
Technological
Good. Technological. And then advancements. Could you say that?
advancements.
Advance. I'd like you to try and say it a bit slower. I don't want you to read slowly, but what I want you to make sure you're pronouncing each part of the word fully. So technological advancements. Could you say that?
Technological advancements
Okay, not bad, a bit better. So technological advancements have transformed the landscape of modern communication. Could you read that for me?
Technological advancements have transformed the landscape of modern communication.
Okay, that's better. Another thing I want you to be aware of, Russell, is when I talk about fluency, it doesn't just mean being able to speak English. When I talk about fluency and flow, it's important to sound more native in English, to read it in more of a flowing way. So what happens is sometimes you kind of stop and then you read one word quickly and then you stop a little bit. So I want you to pay attention to the way I'm reading it, and not what I'm saying, but the speed or the pace that I'm reading it. So technological advancements have transformed the landscape of modern communication. Did you notice that I'm not really spending longer on one word and then stopping? That's what I want you to try and work on. So have one more go at that and just try to flow a bit more, okay?
Yeah.
So have one more go, please, Russell.
Technological advancement have transformed the landscape of modern communication.
Oh, I lost it. Okay, you dropped out for a second, but that was really much better. Honestly, I heard a big improvement there. So I'm not going to read this part. I want you to try and read the second half of the sentence using the strategies that I just told you, or the feedback that I just gave to you, okay? So just try to read the second half of that sentence, please, Russell.
Revolutionizing,
Oops.
revolutionizing how individuals interact with one another across the globe.
Honestly, Russell, that is a huge improvement. That sounded much better flow to my ears after that. All right, are you still here, Michi? Or did we? No, okay, you've gone. That's okay. She's not. That's all right. She wasn't feeling. All right, guys, thank you for participating in that, and I hope that you can see how having a teacher giving you feedback on especially something like that, like the reading one, read aloud, yeah, it can be really useful.